How you going? Hey, I'm Scotty Schindler. I'm here to talk to you today about startups, business to business, securing clients, and what I call a can analysis, which is what something every startup and every business needs to go through. But I'm going to focus today a bit more around in the startup arena, right? Now, to give you a bit of a background, I in 2000 went on a startup journey, and it took me 2 years and 6 attempts to get Renet off the ground. So Renet was a real estate software product. And I founded Renet, the company, in 2002. And it went on to become quite a successful little business and a startup. So it took about 15 years, that journey. And then I exited. I then stayed for another 3 years and finally found out I wasn't a very good employee. I was far better at being my own company owner and company director. So I exited and retired early. And that's the startup journey that I went on. So basically, I'll talk to you today about business to business, which is what Renet product was, securing clients, which is how I grew the company, and the can analysis. And it's something that you need to constantly do. So the can analysis. Now, I know you've never heard of it before. So the can analysis is as simple as this, and you have to do it. In fact, in the system 1357 that I teach people in business, leadership, and sales, it's the three. Okay, so you have to do a can analysis. And that means you have to look at conditions, actions, and needs. The beautiful thing about needs, though, is you can actually create needs. Okay, so sometimes the market needs what you've got, and sometimes you have to go to market and create a need. And if you've got a true startup, essentially you're creating a need. You're fulfilling something that people don't even know they need yet. And that's what probably a true definition of startup is. So there's looking at the marketplace, there's conditions. So what's happening? There's actions. What are people doing? And then the needs. What do you think people need in the marketplace? And once again, you have to do that can analysis. And in the startup world, well, basically, the better you are at looking at the conditions, actions, and needs, and then creating a solution for that, or solving the problem, the more chance there is of the startup actually getting off the ground and succeeding. So I'll talk a little bit about the can analysis. I'm also going to talk about a little bit securing clients and what you need to do to secure clients. Now, as far as that pathway goes, obviously, initially there's a sale, but really we want clients. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about that as well. And the last one is the B2B. I do want to go into business to business solutions. And that's what Renet was. So the company I started, Renet, was a real estate software product. And the consumers obviously were very important, but they didn't pay the bills. The people that paid the bills was the real estate agents or officers. So I sold my products and services business to business, but the end user was actually the consumer. And the agent looked after the consumer. I looked after the businesses as a true business to business model. So let's get into it. Let's have a look at some of the things around conditions, actions, needs, and what you need to do a proper analysis. So a can analysis, let's look at it. I say a little bit of history first. Now you'll notice over on the side here is a fire brigade hat. I did nearly 8 years in the fire brigade. So a little bit of history. They had what was called a can report, which is completely different, but same. So we were on ground and there'd be an incident, there'd be a house fire. And when there wasn't too much time for chatter. So what would happen is we'd have to report very quickly and succinctly our can report, conditions, actions, needs. Okay. And that was our form of communication. So essentially what happened is we'd get a radio communication and the zone commander or the area commander, the officer in charge would say, can I have a can report, please? So let's look at conditions. Now I want you to think laterally about how we use this now in business. Okay. And I'll come back to that in a second. But conditions, what's happening? Is the fire getting bigger? Was the fire getting smaller? Am I in control or am I out of control? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? What are the conditions like? That's what they want to know instantly. Then they go actions. So now I've got to start reporting back. What am I actually doing? Well, I'm putting water on the fire, or I'm watching and maintaining, holding. Okay, what am I actually doing? And lastly is what do I need? Look, it's getting out of control. I need more people. I need more resources. No, it's in control. I'm okay. everything's good. Okay, so conditions, actions, needs. As a quick example, look, the fire's in control. I'm putting water on it. I have no further needs. Boom, perfect communication. But when it comes to business, we then take that to a whole nother level. But think about it. So what's happening in the marketplace that you're trying to get into? What are the conditions? Are things getting bigger? Are things growing? Is there opportunities? Is there demand? What is that? That is an opportunity in the conditions of that marketplace you want to enter as a startup. Actions. What are people doing? What are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to solve? What is the actual conditions that people are in business for? And what are they actually doing, or what aren't they doing if you want to do the reverse? Okay, so what aren't people doing? In other words, where's the hole in the marketplace because there's no action? And that's a perfect startup. So conditions, actions, and now needs. And this is probably the most important one. Okay, so if you can solve the need of people's businesses, well, then you're solving a problem. And if you're solving a problem, guess what? People are willing to pay because business is business and business costs money. Okay, so if you can solve a problem, all of a sudden your conditions, actions, and needs comes into play. So when you see a need, and don't get me wrong, everyone says, oh, this is what they need, this is what they need. Okay, but what's the solution? And that's what startups do. That's what business does. They have a solution to a problem. They don't just talk about it, they go and create these solutions. So the better you can create a need, find a need, or hear what people's needs are based around the conditions and actions, the more chance you have of your startup getting off the ground and staying off the ground and being able to build that business. And once again, it's a can analysis, a living and breathing thing. And as things change, as things move, you need to constantly be doing a conditions, actions, and needs analysis. You also need to future plan it. What do you think is going to happen this year? So right now you can see what's going on. Okay, so that's this year. What was it like 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago? What were the conditions, actions, needs in that industry or that product or that solution then? And if I go back to the startup that I had at Renet, which was an internet-based service provider, well, 5 or 10 years earlier, there was no internet. It was all very new. And I just had a suspicion they would like to be what's now called on the cloud. Back then, it was just called the internet. So at the turn of the century, it was just the internet. But I thought, hey, looking at the marketplace, maybe they need to be able to work remotely or by mobile phone, which at the time was only like a data conduit. It wasn't the smartphones we have today. But I thought maybe they need that sort of thing. But looking at the conditions, actions, needs, once again today, what was it like before? Now the big one is, what do you think the conditions, actions, and needs are going to be like next year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years down the line? Because there might be a need right now, but no need in the future. Think about typewriters. There was no need for them in the future once computers took off. And it was only, I think, 2002, the last typewriter company actually closed down. Okay. Kodak never thought digital cameras would ever take off. They didn't catch on to that. So there's conditions, actions, needs, and it's important for people to future plan what's happening, what are people doing, and what do they need? What was it like before? What's it like now? But what's it going to be like next? So that's the can analysis. Real quick, real high, real elevated, but it works. And it's constantly something that you'll do in business to succeed. So let's have a look at securing clients. Now, this might sound really obvious here, but the key word here is clients. They're customers. They're not actually sales. They're not actually something that just is transient. You want customers and clients to hang around. So how do you secure them? First things first is it's a mindset. What you're looking at doing is establishing relationships with people. In fact, people buy off who they know, like, and trust. But that know, like, and trust might like engage a sale and get someone to buy into what you're doing. But if you want to establish and secure clients, you need to treat them like you're going on a journey together. Involve them in the can analysis. Now they're a client, or before they're a client, but even after they're a client. constantly go and ask the market, especially your clients, what's happening? What are you doing? And what do you need? See how the can analysis lives and breathes? It's something that you'll constantly do in business. But once again, securing clients. So the first thing you need to do is understand that it's a mindset. So you're not trying to get sales. You're not trying to get revenue. You're trying to create a business with clients that want to stay a part of whatever it is that you're developing. It doesn't matter what industry it is. If you don't have any clients, you don't have any sales, you don't have any money. If you don't have any money, there's no interest in the business, right? If there's no interest in the business, there's no business. So customers and clients are really, really important. Now, I know that sounds obvious, but it will surprise you how many people don't take clients on a journey. They're more worried on they're more focused on the product and not the people who are going to use it. So it's really important to think about the people. In fact, number one in system 1357 is people. Okay. So think about the people. So you want to do a transition from going out and getting a sale on the product to actually getting people to become part of the company and part of the journey. Now, to do that, you need to create an environment for people to feel like they're included. Okay. Now, with Renet, for example, what I did with Renet to get real estate agents to feel included was I would constantly go around and do all the training, and we did online training and things like that. That way I was on the coal face. I was constantly finding out what they needed. I was also involving them in what we had and what our future plans were. So that involvement, that engagement is what helps you secure clients, because they don't have to stay clients, right? They have to want to stay as a client. So the only way you can do that is by creating those relationships and maintaining those relationships long-term. But put some of those things in play now. Have a think about how you're going to retain that client with future growth in the business over the next 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. Think that long, because if you're, whatever you're starting up, if your business works, these people are going to be clients for a little while. And it's really important that you think about it long-term now. Okay, so not sales, it's not just product, there's people involved in this transaction, and you have to look after your people. That's how you'll secure long-term clients. So let's take a look at the business-to-business model. Now, there is a big difference between the business-to-business model and the business-to-consumer model. So B2B instead of B2C. I'm actually a huge fan of the B2B model, but don't worry, there's a lot of awesome startups that have the B2C model. But I didn't mind the B2B model because I didn't have to deal with all the consumers. The businesses wanted to that I was selling to that bought services and products from me, but I just didn't want to deal with them 24 hours a day, which is what some people demand, right? So I only wanted to deal with the business people during business hours and have business conversations. So I found that really, really important. But, you know, interestingly enough, if I go back to the can analysis and securing clients, B2B also had a second meaning for me. It also meant belly to belly. In other words, belly to belly is about going out and seeing people face to face, going out and actually having that relationship. So B2B has two meanings for me. First off, yes, it's business to business, and I'm a huge fan. But second of all, if you're going to have a B2B, you still have to go out belly to belly and meet and talk to your clients and customers. But finally, B2B also means you need to be thinking about that business you're selling to, the customers, because the only thing that's important to them is what they want, and they want their customers to be happy, whatever that solution is that you two, business to business, are creating and developing. So your can analysis has to be at two layers if you're doing business to business. So you have to start looking at what the consumers want and whether they will become customers of the business who is ultimately your customer, your client. So you have to be thinking deeper. I call it win-win-win. It's like win-win. It's just that extra layer, doing a full 360. So business to business, it's critical that the decision-making process is different. So you have to think like a business person when you're selling business to business. Consumers are a little bit more purchasey and transient. They'll come and go, okay? But that's really not what you're providing if you're providing business to business. Let that business deal with it that you're selling to, who's a client of yours, supplier or whatever you're going to call it, they can deal with the customers. But what you're dealing with is how to actually provide a solution for your customer so they can provide that solution or solve a problem for the end user. So you've got to be thinking that deeper layer, right down at that grassroots layer. Now, I know you already are, but the person paying the bills is going to be the person in the middle, the business to business model. So the business that you're actually having as a client. It doesn't matter what sort of industry you're in, you're going to have that middle layer. So I personally like the business to business model because it allowed me only just deal with business people at a professional level. And business people like to make decisions. So it's a bit easier. Consumers are a little bit more, a lot of successful startups are in the consumer space. It just wasn't something that I fancied. So I'm a big fan of business to business solutions. So getting back into that, so business to business. So it ties in, once again, with the CAN analysis. It ties in with your client and customer retention, okay? Because it's business to business as well as belly to belly. So have a think about your model. How are you going to be able to deliver that? Once again, this year, next year, in 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. All right, so let me try and bring it all together for you. Now, going back historically, I said I had a startup. And I said to you that Renet was my 6th attempt at a startup. Now, I was always wanting to be in the business to business space. And a couple of the startups I had churned into where they were trying to be in the consumer space. And it didn't work for me. But let me give you a bit of history here and give you an example how I bring all this together. Maybe give you some ideas of some of the journeys you may go on or some experience for your own peace of mind that not everything works out. So the business to business model, the first business to business model I had was in the medical industry at the turn of the century. So in 2000. And that was to deal with, all the people in the medical industry being able to have their online presence through a portal. Great idea. Turned out I had a bad business partnership, and within a few months, that thing was over. So it failed more because of the arrangement I had, as opposed to the conditions, actions, needs. In fact, I still think it was a great opportunity, but it just didn't work out. The next opportunity I had, I went into trying to do a portal for local agents, local businesses. People could register their business on a local sort of basis and set these up all over Australia. Remember, this was the turn of the century. The internet was still new. Cloud computing wasn't out. People didn't know what Google was. There was all these things, right? The internet was still very new. In fact, the Murdochs and the Kerry Packers of the world were running around saying this internet thingy is not going to last. And I thought, oh, okay. But anyway, I was still willing to try. That didn't really work. It just didn't get traction. Still a good idea to this day. It still doesn't really have traction anyway. So I'm glad I pulled out of that one. Then I decided to get into security, internet networking and things like that. Now, this ended up becoming a B2C model. And the very first client I went to, I just didn't get into it. I didn't like it. I got out of that before I even started. One client in. It was like, this isn't going to work. But in 2001, I bought some books on programming, and I started to write programs that were server-side. In other words, they provided a solution a little bit deeper than just what would, back in the turn of the century, was a website, which was pretty advanced in its day, right? These websites were like brochures. They were unreal. They had photos and text. They had multiple pages. It was unreal. So when I started writing the programs, I came up with a solution. I looked at the conditions, actions, needs of 3 industries: the accommodation, the car yard, and the real estate industry. Long story short is, believe it or not, the actual accommodation one and the car yard one, I both got traction in. But the one I got the most traction in, the easiest or least resistance, was in the real estate industry. So the other 2 didn't really fail. And as we know, actually, they didn't fail at all, did they? Car yard industry, accommodation online. Oh my, maybe if I'd have been a bit more smarter, a bit more educated, or a bit more confident, I could have pursued those 2 as well. Nonetheless, I decided to let the other 2 gracefully exit, and I started and succeeded with Renet in February 2002. But now I had gone in, and after 2 years of experimenting, the conditions, actions, and needs were working. And I now had some clients. I now had customers that were on a journey with me. And it was business to business. So it was a perfect setup for exactly what I wanted. So then I started having to reinvent myself. So over the journey of 2002, I set some big goals and started looking at the industry in the future. Now, at first, the software simply did this. It allowed real estate agents to upload their photos and property descriptions to their website. That's all it did. Simultaneously, it went on some advertising portals that I had. If you go back to the second startup I did, I had a real estate portal. So it allowed it to do that. So it was pretty cool. In the day, people went, wow. Nowadays, it's like, is that all? But anyway, it was really good technology at the turn of the century. But, things were changing fast. The internet was becoming more and more of the norm. But here's some of the resistance I had to go through. So if you're going to have a true startup, you are going to get resistance. Now, when I told people you go on the internet, you Google search, people would say, so who's Google? I mean, who'd ever go there? So I had resistance with that. I also had resistance because I didn't let people buy the software, which was traditionally what you did. You'd get a disk and you put it on your computer, you download the software, and that's how you bought software. I said, no. You log in on the internet and you can find your data anywhere you like. You can log in and maintain those properties, change the price of a property. If it changes, it goes up or down. You can do it all remotely, anywhere in the world, even in your yacht in Fiji. And people went, oh, really? But can't I buy the software? Well, no, you can't buy the software. Nowadays, it's all called software as a service. In fact, you almost can't buy software anymore. It's all software as a service. But back at the turn of the century, there was no one else doing it. So I had a lot of resistance to two things. First of all, it was in the cloud, as we now call it, and it was something they couldn't buy. They had to pay a monthly fee for. So that was a lot of resistance. So if you've got a true startup, you're going to find resistance, and you need to be able to either evolve or be confident what you've got, that it's going to be the future. And then what happened was things started to change and things were growing. So there was more advertising portals. Realestate.com really took off in Australia. And so did another competing company called Domain. All of a sudden, agents didn't want to have to manually enter this data everywhere. So I then had to look at the conditions, actions, and needs. So by 2004, not much longer, I was also doing data distribution. Agents didn't want to have to double handle any of their data. Anyway, so as you can see, things started to take off. Anyway, by about 2008, things were then called the cloud. But I went from managing listings now to managing the people in the database too. In other words, the buyers and the sellers. So the conditions, actions, and needs morphed into what was now called a CRM. Okay, so a CRM, helping managing people. So the CRM evolved and it started managing staff and performance and all sorts of things like that too. And eventually what happened was we started doing everything in the real estate office. So it went from originally doing a website to doing data distribution on listings to managing people to doing everything in the agent's office, okay, including their financials, except for one thing, which was the final trust account. So that's what happened on my journey. And that's just a quick analogy there over 10 years. By 2010, guess what started to happen? The market was doing these sorts of things too, right? We had a global financial crisis. We had all these things that were happening. In fact, the real estate industry in Australia, I couldn't predict this doing a CAN analysis, shrunk by 10%. And it was the only year I ever had a loss in business. I didn't actually lose profit-wise. I just had a shrink in revenue because the actual market shrunk. But in actual fact, I always thought my business was recession-proof. So when I looked at the conditions, actions, and needs, people needed my software more when the market was tough than when it was booming. Because anyone can sell real estate when it's booming, right? But when the market's tough, that's when you need that customer relationship management software, that CRM. That's when you need to be able to have less staff and just single entry data. So I knew it was more recession proof, and it proved to be the case. That's why I really encourage you to constantly start from where I started from today. So I spoke about business to business. I spoke about securing clients, and also spoke about the CAN analysis. If I didn't do those things along the journey, my business may not have actually lasted, but it did. Not only did it last, it grew because I did all those things. Now, I could talk all day on what was a 15-year journey, in fact, 18 years, depending on how you look at it, but I won't. I just want to keep this nice and high and elevated for you, that these three things are really important for any sort of startup. So once again, do your CAN analysis. That's your conditions, actions, needs. Think about not sales or product, even though they're really important. You got to think about the customers, the people paying the bills, and you want to be able to secure those customers and those clients. And if you're going to go to a business to business model, which is great, B2C is fine too, same system, except business to business, you've got to be thinking about the three layers. There's what you're providing, what the businesses who are providing the solutions or solving the problems for the end user, the consumer, what are they doing and what do they want? So it goes into the middle layer more. Now, I know it sounds really simple, but it's really important that you take time to stop, look, and listen to what's happening in the marketplace. It's okay to do some assumptions, especially if it's a startup. Because if it's a true startup, it hasn't been done before. Okay, so which means you're going to be a bit of a trailblazer. You're going to be breaking some ground. You're going to crack some eggs, and things are going to work and some things aren't. And that's perfectly normal in the startup space. But it doesn't mean you don't have confidence. It doesn't mean you can't believe in what you're doing. And it doesn't mean it won't work. Because guess what? A lot of startups do work. And to be honest with you, mostly it's got to do with the knowledge and the ability of the person to stick at it or pivot and change like I did. It took me 6 goes. So that's some of the resilience or that grit and determination, as well as wisdom that you're going to need to get through these next few phases. So regardless of how successful this first one is, I want you to stay confident in your belief that there are systems out there that you can employ to get your business off the ground and grow. Whether it's this one, and I wish you all the best with this one, okay, or if it's like me, it took 6. I know other people it took a few more. But I want to wish you all the best and all the success. But follow these 3 things I've shared with you today. Because without that, my business wouldn't have been what it was. So once again, the can analysis, secure your clients, and think business to business. All right, everyone. Thanks for your time. Strive for healthy, wealthy, and wise. And we'll talk soon. See ya.